Thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. As Director of International Buddhist Study College, I would like to bring you all to learn sciences and Buddhism. So far, you know more about Buddhism, concept, and the way you practice. But when we talk about sciences, psychology, sociology, cosmology, and so on, I think we don't know more about it. But the Buddha know 18 sciences. When he went to study at Takashila with Ajahn Tissa Pamok, he know 18 sciences. Then he would be able to find out true happiness inside his mind. He can apply together between sciences and the world of mind. You call Buddha Sasana or Buddhism. Actually, the Buddhism is no have this word in term of Pali. Tripitaka 45 volume is no Buddha Sasana inside there. No Buddhism. We just call Dhamma Vinaya, Brahmacharya, something like that. So they built this word, Buddhism, approximately, I think, just within 50 years, because this word occurred when Buddhists around the world, they have meeting in Colombo. They try to have a new one. What is the new word that you would like to use? They talk about Christian, Islam, Hinduism. What about Buddhism? Buddhism, in terms of our word, we call Buddha and Sasana. Buddha means sometimes you call like a person. Samana Kodom, you might know the name Samana Kodom. That is his name, Samana Kodom. But Sasana meaning is teaching. The teaching of Samana Kodom, or you call Buddha. Buddha, when you talk about the real meaning of Buddha, we call wisdom, awakening, and rejoice. That is the word when you talk about Buddha. Whenever you know you have more wisdom, awakening, and rejoice, you call Buddha. Buddha is not the person. But many times when you talk about Buddha, you call the person proper name. Many times you call Samana Kodom those who are the last Buddha when you talk about it. But this is the way. How can you bring two things together? Many sciences and the teaching of the Buddha. For example, the Four Noble Truths, from Vihara, and many things. So I think 2 weeks from now, today, it might be within 10 of next month, we invite many professors from around the world. I call global. That is a global academic platform. Global academic platform. We invite many professors from around the world to share their experiences with you all. They know more about sciences, politics, of course, economics, of course, but I would like you, when you listen to them all, I would like you all to think about this matter, how we approach Buddhist approach to many sciences. Because one day, when you finish PhD, MA from our college, you might go somewhere to teach them all. They know more about science. They know more about sociology. They know more about marketing or politics. What about you? You learn about Buddhism. How can you approach and respond Buddha teaching to them all, to their sciences? How can we integrate with each other? The way you learn from visiting professor, that is the way you bring Buddha teaching and another sciences to teach many people around the world. Especially topic today, professor talk about civic society. Professor talk about Buddhist education and value of university. That is very important one. When you learn from professor, I need more questions. Not just listen to professor, but please ask whatever you would like to know more and add. You may give some suggestion, because professor come from Western, come from the West. What about you? Today you learn with professor, but 27 you will learn Buddhism from the West. Buddhism from America, Buddhism and America. 28, 30 you will learn Buddhism in European country. You should know more about situation in America and European country, the way they practice, the way they learn Buddhism. Because one day you have to go there. Couple of years ago, I went to Poland, went to Jagiellonian University. No time to meet professor anymore. So that's why you have to come to meet me today. Before that time, please, Venerable Labu, would you please give more information, introduce professor by yourself? Because you know each other clearly. I give you a floor to explain and give more information about professor. Please, Venerable Labu.
At first, I pay my homage to the Buddha, and also I pay my great respect to our Honorable Director, Paramahansa, make this wonderful knowledge sharings in IBSC. And without our directors, it will never be happen in here. Actually, I know the Professor Fran from nearly 1 year and 3 months. Because we have a meet in Chulalongkorn University. It's a peace conference, and after that we are working for the negotiations for the non-discriminations, and also how to promote the civil society, peace and harmony. And I also visit in Poland for request to East University, and this university is very wonderful university, and they have many curriculums related with the sociology and the peace and conflict. And also I have a wonderful opportunity to meet with the foreign divisional relationships rectors, and he also explaining about there, and he is very happy to meet with our most venerable directors, Paramahansa. Maybe he will become in Asia, and we will be meet with our directors in future to make collaborations with the Europe and ours, because they are very wonderful and they are very appreciate. I show them our curriculums. Mostly they want to know about how to with the inner peace to develop in the European country and to be promote the peace in theirs. And our professors, he is actually now based on working in Asia, and he teaching in Vietnam, and also he teach in Cambodia last week, and also in Thailand, South Korea and Japan. And after that, he also take the 2 workshop in Chulalongkorn University, and yesterday also he take one of the workshop in Chulalongkorn University. So they going to be also establish the Western theory in here, how to the first world and second world, restoring the world and reconstruction again by peacefully without the non-violence, or without how to be not make any conflict others, just only peace, non-violence process. So my professor have many books and many articles he published in a world, many magazines, and also he's the one of the founder of the Never Again Associations, which is their slogan is no discriminations. Because as we know that Buddhism, our Buddha first introduced not new things. This is introduced 2005 years ago, not discriminations. Buddha first tell this is the no caste in India. So this is they are trying to promote, but maybe we have a knowledge gap each other. So they are promoting their social way, but we are promoting our Buddhism way. So I invite on behalf of my directors, our university directors, to him what they are going to do and what we can make to relationships with Buddhism and the Western of the things we can occur in here for all of our friends, all of my classmates, and all of my Dhamma brothers and sisters. Thank you so much. I think this is enough. I think you will be learned from our professor directly. Thank you so much.
Very much. Please give me just a minute to set up. I think this is fine. Thank you. Yeah, this is very good. Thank you very much. Good morning, dear esteemed Ajahns, dear friends. I am really honored and humbled by your invitation to this wonderful university, this wonderful college that I know has a long history, but has a really impressive present too, and I believe has a very bright future as well. It is a really great opportunity for me to be here with you, and I'm very grateful also to my good friend Venerable Lablu for assisting with this cooperation. I am going to talk about the role of civil society in the promotion of peace and the promotion of diversity and respect for diversity, which is the main subject, which is not just part of my academic research, but it is directly related to my own role in my country, in Poland, in Europe, in terms of civil society activism, in terms of the educational activities on promotion of diversity, respect for diversity, and as Lablu said, the promotion of the principles of non-discrimination. And once again, thanking you for your wonderful hospitality, for your openness, for the spirit of friendship which I have experienced here. I sincerely believe, well, these are the values that bring us together, irrespective of the philosophical or religious background. I believe the values of respect and respect for diversity in particular, these are very much Buddhist values. These are the values that, as I understand, are very much at the core of your teachings, and that really gives me an extra pleasure, and it's an extra honor for me to share this discourse. I come from Poland, which is one of many countries in Europe. It is located in East Central Europe, as you probably know. And it is a country with its own history, with its own complex history. And one very important part of our history is the tragedy of the mid-20th century, the tragedy of the Holocaust, when millions of people perished during World War II, during the Nazi occupation, perished at the hands of the Nazis as a result of racist ideology, an ideology of radical intolerance. And the name of my civil society organization that was already mentioned here, Never Again, directly relates to this tragic experience of World War II, of the Nazi occupation of Poland, of the Nazi Holocaust. But of course, this phrase, never again, can mean many different things in many different contexts. It can mean something else, but also significant, also important. In Cambodia, for example, it's a country that I also know well, where I spent several months. And whenever I mentioned the phrase "never again," the reactions were very positive. And of course, people in Cambodia could very well relate also to the experience of genocide. Everybody in Poland, in their family history, has a story that relates to the tragedy of World War II and the tragedy of the Nazi occupation of Poland. But our organization always stresses we should not stop with the application of the phrase, of the motto "never again" to commemoration of the victims only. We always stress it must be more than commemoration. We must relate to the present challenges, to the present issues, the present contemporary problems of discrimination and racism and xenophobia. I very much wanted to share with you my personal experience of civil society activism in the struggle against racism and discrimination, which for me personally started in the early 1990s. When I was a young student in Poland, I personally witnessed several instances, several cases of violence against different types of minorities, against people who looked different from the average Polish citizen. I witnessed this violence in the streets of Warsaw, and I asked myself this question: how is it possible in Europe, in Poland, in a country with this kind of tragic past, for people who subscribe to neo-Nazi ideology, to racist ideology, to openly promote such hatred, to openly promote discrimination? How is it possible for such violence to take place in the streets of my city, which is a city that suffered so much because of such ideology already in its history? A city that was completely destroyed during World War II as a result of racist hatred, as a result of Nazi ideology, which is the most extreme form of intolerance that we know of. And to be honest with you, I'm still asking this question myself today. I don't think we have a perfect answer. I am sure the answer is related to something about human nature. But still, I believe it is a very important question to ask. And not only in Poland, but it is a very important question to ask. How is it possible for racism and neo-Nazism to appear and to exist still in the 20th century? How is it possible for such extreme form of intolerance to continue? But also importantly, or maybe even more importantly, what we as citizens, as human beings, what we can do when we are confronted with this kind of issues, with this kind of problems, in our society today. Apparently, I was not the only person asking myself these kind of questions in Poland and in Europe in the early 1990s. There was also a wave of violence from neo-Nazis, from racists in Germany. So the country where Nazism was born historically in the 1920s and the 1930s. There were many reports in international media about cases of attacks, especially against refugees and migrants in Germany at the time, committed by neo-Nazi groups. In several cases, houses where refugees lived were set on fire by those groups. And there was a lot of attention paid to it by German public opinion and by international public opinion. Similar cases happened in Poland around the same time, but there was very little discussion about it in Poland, and there was very little discussion about it internationally. So in this sense, there was a big difference between Poland and Germany. Some of the problems were similar, but the reaction from society was different. In Germany, we had a big discussion. In Poland, we had silence, almost complete silence on those questions. So one of the first tasks, one of the first goals, aims of our group as a civil society group was to break the silence around the issue of racism and discrimination in our society, and especially about the issue of neo-Nazi violence against minority groups. Around that time, I met this person. That's his picture here. That is Marcin Kornak. Marcin Kornak was my very close friend. He passed away 5 years ago. Was a very special person in Poland. He was a poet. He was a lyricist. He was a social activist. He was also a disabled person. I have another picture of Marcin here sitting in a wheelchair. Despite his disability, Marcin was very active and he was a very inspiring individual who managed to inspire people like me to come together on the level of civil society, on the level of grassroots activism, and he created the first group that later took the name Never Again. This is the phrase in Polish, nigdy więcej, which means never again in English. And it became also the title of the magazine, and this is one of the issues of the magazine recently published. The first issue was published in 1994, and the magazine became one of the tools for breaking the silence around racism and discrimination in Poland. You should understand that was before the internet existed. So a printed publication at that time was the best tool for informing the general public, for reaching out to public opinion and raising awareness of the issue of racism and xenophobia. Of course, the magazine is still there in the printed version, but now we use the internet much more. But that was from the start the very important goal: breaking the silence, raising awareness. Raising the awareness of the existence of those problems in our society, and the magazine became quickly very popular in Poland. But of course, Poland is a large country. We cannot reach everybody with the printed magazine. But what was important from the early years was that many of our readers, many of the readers of Never Again magazine, have been journalists from the biggest media, from the biggest newspapers, from television, who used a lot of the information that we gathered and published and made public in their own work in the mass circulation media. So in this way we could reach a much bigger audience. And from the very beginning, a very important part of the magazine was something that we called Brunatna Księga. A brown book is the exact translation, which is a register of cases of hate speech and hate crime committed in Poland. In many cases, nobody else reported on those attacks. So our main role was to collect those cases and publish them. And for this reason, we created a national network of correspondents. In many cases, young people in the local communities who were also concerned with the growing problem of violence, of aggression, on the grounds of racism and xenophobia, and who also wanted to share this information with the wider public. And Never Again became an important platform for those people, for those correspondents. So the network of the correspondents became a very important part of the Never Again association. And until now, the magazine is, I think I can say it that way. It is the biggest platform for discussion, for debate on issues of racism and discrimination, not just in Poland, but generally speaking in the region of Central Europe. So, like I said, the magazine is an important intellectual platform. It has analytic articles and essays. But we also understood very early on it is not enough. And we understood much more has to be done to raise awareness on a scale that would be appropriate, that would be adequate vis-à-vis the challenge of growing intolerance and racism in our country. And we understood that the role of civil society can be really crucial. What do I mean by civil society here? There are many definitions of civil society, and I'm not going to go into detailed academic discussions of what civil society means. It is a phrase used by philosophers and authors of social theories such as John Locke or Antonio Gramsci and many others, Zbigniew Pełczyński and many others, also Hegel. But what civil society means to us is it means independent activity which is independent from state institutions, activity which is independent from the authorities, from the government, activity that comes from the heart, that comes from the grassroots, that comes from a social need that is identified and addressed independently of the state. Okay, and of course education is very important in this regard, but in our opinion, what is especially important is what you may call informal education, which in our view is a very key aspect of civil society activity. What do we mean by informal education? Is the type of education, the type of transmitting the message, the positive message, that happens outside of the formal educational system, so outside of the school, outside of the university. This is not to say that the school and the university is not important, and I would not say this as a university teacher myself. But I really believe there are also other ways of transmitting the message, and in our case, a very important channel for raising awareness has been the platform of popular culture, and the most important elements of that for us have been music and sports. Popular culture, as we all know, by definition, is popular. By definition, it has a potentially mass audience. Okay, and I believe it is neutral. It is neither good or bad by itself. It's a platform. It can be a tool. It depends on how the tool is used. The tool of popular culture and youth culture and subculture in particular has been used often in a very negative way. Also by racist groups, also by those groups that promote hatred and intolerance. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Music has been used by groups promoting hatred and intolerance, including racist and Nazi ideologies. Sport. Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. sport has been used, and especially in the European case and in the Polish case, the football culture and subculture, soccer, has been used as a platform to promote intolerance. We wanted to do something else. We wanted to use popular culture, including music, including sports, in a positive way, in a way that would give the good message, the message of peace and respect for diversity. So we organized 2 civil society campaigns that I believe we can call educational, but these are campaigns that take place outside of the formal educational system. So the first of these campaigns is called Music Against Racism. That's a very simple title. It's immediately obvious what the message is. It is actually inspired by similar such civil society initiatives in other countries. I think the biggest such initiative took place in the United Kingdom in the late 70s. I actually met personally one of the musicians who initiated this movement in the UK, which was called Rock Against Racism. His name is Tom Robinson, and when I myself studied in Britain, I was very much impressed by Tom Robinson, and I had a chance to discuss the story of Rock Against Racism with him, and together with Marcin Kornak, with the leader of Never Again, we thought we should do something similar in Poland, and with no funding, with zero budget, we organized a campaign that reached millions of people, especially young people, with the message of peace and respect, using this logo and this slogan, Music Against Racism. We had a number of records, CDs, compilation CDs with the participation of both Polish and international artists of very different types of music, showing that music can unite people, and that not just the words, not just the lyrics, not just the message was important, but also the diversity of the sounds. The soundscape can also reflect the basic idea of tolerance and respect. So musicians, artists from all corners joined and supported this campaign, and they also included this logo and this message on the sleeves of their own records. So in this way, also the campaign reached thousands and millions of music fans, both in Poland and outside of Poland. But I want to give you one example of our continued activity in the field of music. It is a festival that takes place on the Polish-German border every year in the summer, in the first week of August. And it is actually important and not accidental. It is on the Polish-German border. I already mentioned both Poland and Germany are the countries with a very special and tragic history of World War II and conflict. So the very fact that the festival takes place on the Polish-German border is a symbol of reconciliation. It is actually the biggest music festival in Europe. Every year it has about 500,000 participants, 500,000. That's a lot of people, believe me. If you go there, the size of it, the scale of it is overwhelming in a way, but it has a great, friendly, positive atmosphere. The festival is known internationally as the Polish Woodstock Festival. And I think that probably rings a bell. I can see Professor Frank smiling. It is definitely a familiar concept to him. I believe the Polish festival is now bigger than the original Woodstock in America in the 60s. But of course the inspiration is quite clear. And the original Woodstock festival in America in the 60s also had the message of peace. Okay? So there is a certain continuity in this sense. But it is a festival that has been organized in Poland, next to the German border, for more than 20 years now. So there is also a certain tradition that we have in Poland, and our civil society organization, Never Again, is not the only organizer of the festival, because as you can imagine that's a really big undertaking. So there is a number of organizations active there, but we are very proud to be very much involved in this festival every year as a civil society organization, conducting education. Conducting workshops, conducting discussions, interacting with the participants, talking about the problems of racism and discrimination, but also about the ideas of respect, diversity, and tolerance. And some of those discussions are difficult discussions because the young people are often influenced by the ideology of intolerance. But I think precisely because of that, this kind of conversations is very, very important and valuable. And we also organize something else at this festival, and that is a sports activity. It is a football tournament, a soccer championship, which became very popular among the participants, because the concerts normally start in the afternoon, and you can imagine in the morning there is 500,000 people with not much to do. So what we offer is a sports activity, but it is a sports activity with a message. It is not sports for the sake of sports, not just for for physical. For the sake of physical activity, which of course is also good with health benefits, but for us what is especially important is the message, is the educational aspect of the football tournament. And the title of the tournament, the title of the sports campaign also is "Let's Kick Racism Out of the Stadiums," which is a metaphor, okay? So it's a non-violent campaign. It is a campaign that addresses the issue of racism and discrimination in sports and through sports. And like I already mentioned, football, soccer is for us the most popular sport, but of course there are other sports that also can be mentioned in this context. I remember in our conversations, cricket was mentioned previously, which is not the most popular sport in Poland, but in some countries that would be more relevant. For us, soccer is the biggest platform, and I admit also the biggest challenge, because well, as a part of popular culture, it is a particularly paradoxical aspect of the whole problematic of racism and discrimination. In Poland and in other European states, often the football team is the most diverse, the most multicultural part of social life, because there are players from all over the world, all different backgrounds, all different skin colors. That includes players from Africa and South America. Some of them are very successful. So the football team is often very diverse. But if you look at the supporters in the stadium, often some of the most extreme examples of racist behavior can be found there. Racist abuse, racist slogans, neo-Nazi symbols. Unfortunately, that is also present and often visible in the football stadiums, especially in Central and Eastern Europe. So it's a very challenging environment. And when we started this campaign under the title "Let's Kick Racism Out of the Stadiums," many people told us, "Well, you must be crazy, because the situation in the stadiums is so hopeless. It is so difficult. You will never be able to change it, to improve it." But we always said, well, if it's difficult, it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. On the contrary, it's an extra reason for us to tackle it, to address the problem. And actually, as you can see in this picture, Marcin Kornak himself was a football fan. So he was disabled. He was in a wheelchair. He could not play football. But this picture was taken in a stadium, and he himself felt passionate about football, and his inspiration, his leadership was important. So we organized football tournaments. We organized different activities under the motto "Let's Kick Racism Out of the Stadiums" for years, when eventually a wonderful golden opportunity came our way, which really allowed us to take this activity to another level. And that was when it was announced that Poland and Ukraine, which is a neighboring country in Eastern Europe, Poland and Ukraine were awarded the organization of the European Football Championships in the year 2012. The European Football Championship is a very big event indeed, with a mass audience, a lot of interest, both in Poland and Ukraine, but also all over Europe and beyond. And I am saying that was a wonderful opportunity for us to take the educational campaign to another level. Well, precisely because of the scale of this event and the scale of this interest and the significance of this event, not just on the sports level, but also on the political level, cultural and economic level. And we had a good ally in the form of UEFA, which is the European Football Federation, the main organizer of the championships. Together with UEFA, we organized a campaign under the title "Respect Diversity," which I think is a good message, and an important message also in the context of football. And for more than 3 years, we organized hundreds of educational events, both in Poland and in Ukraine, across both these countries, under the heading Respect Diversity, and with the support of UEFA. And that included educational activities in schools and outside of schools, often with the participation of famous football players as role models. And of course, the peak of this activity happened during the championship itself in June 2012. And that was the time when many visitors, many football fans, many soccer fans from many countries visited both Poland and Ukraine. And for many people in both Poland and Ukraine, that was actually the first experience of living, just for a few weeks, but a very important experience of living in a multicultural society. Okay, the first experience of meeting personally with people of different nationality, and I believe that is a very important experience for millions of people in both Poland and Ukraine, that they will never forget. But that was also the chance for our civil society initiative to raise awareness, to draw attention to the message of respect and diversity beyond those two countries. So some of you may even remember the semi-finals, when the captains of all the teams, including the famous players such as Cristiano Ronaldo, I think some of you will recognize the name. Yeah, some people are nodding. I am happy to see the confirmation. They read out the statements against racism and discrimination before the games started. And they read it out in the stadium, but even more importantly, that was televised, and millions of people in Europe and beyond watched it live on television. And I can confirm it was us who wrote those declarations for the players to read out, and that was a big satisfaction to us. Of course, we realized that all the millions of people who watched those games on television, it doesn't mean they automatically. They automatically became active anti-racists, but I believe even that moment played a big role on the level of raising awareness of the problem of racism and discrimination, but also raising awareness of the importance of the values of respect for diversity. That, of course, does not mean that the problem of racism and discrimination disappeared in football, in sports, and in our society. But that is one example of what a civil society initiative can accomplish on the level of popular culture. Of course, one last sentence I want to say before we break is it's challenging to to measure the impact. As a sociologist, I can confirm it is not easy to measure the impact of this kind of educational activity, which is often very difficult to measure in terms of sociological surveys, for example. But we also had a qualified sociologist who studied the social impact of our campaign, and the study also confirmed the impact was significant. But for a cultural change, for a positive social change to be sustainable, of course, it requires sustained activity. You cannot affect such change by a single activity. So that is an ongoing challenge for civil society. And I am very happy to continue the conversation, including a more interactive form of dialogue, because I am also very interested in your views and your opinions. These are some examples I wanted to give in the beginning of civil society activity on the topics of racism and intolerance. But before we do that, I suggest we take a 5 minutes break, a 10 minutes break, and then we can continue the dialogue. Okay, thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Thank you for coming back. As I hope you saw in the first part of this dialogue, I tried to tell you something about the problems that we have and the challenges that we have had, but also about some positive initiatives that have been happening on the level of civil society, also and especially in the field of popular culture, including music, including sports. I did not want to give you all the depressing information in the beginning about the negative aspects of the field. But of course, I'm not denying those negative aspects. They are still with us. Yes, those challenges are still very acute, and those initiatives on the level of popular culture, well, they are important, but they are not the only way to address those problems. Let me just mention, if you are interested in a more academic analysis of the field of popular culture, both as a platform for racism and an anti-racism, I have a book which is based on my PhD years ago, under the title Racism and Popular Culture. Well, it exists in Polish and in Russian, but there is also a summary in English, which I am happy to share if you are interested. But before we continue, let me tell you one more story about how sports, in this case football, can unite people, can play a positive role in society, in the promotion of tolerance. Once we got an email which was very special, very untypical, which said, "Hello, I heard about your campaign on racism in sports. I might be useful. You might like to know I was in one team with Pope John Paul II." And John Paul II, the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, as you may know, came from Poland, and he was very popular in Poland for many decades. And that message was really written by his old friend, his school friend, who was Jewish, who was living in the same town as Karol Wojtyła, the future Pope, Wadowice in Poland in the 1930s, and they really played in one team, which was a mixed Polish-Jewish team of school kids. And Jerzy Kluger, who wrote the message, he survived the Nazi Holocaust. A very small percentage of Polish Jews survived the Nazi occupation, the Holocaust. He did. After the war, he lived in Rome, in Italy. And when Karol Wojtyła became the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, they met again and remembered the days when they played football together. That's a very interesting story, showing that such experiences can bring people together, and also sports, also football, can bring people together and promote respect instead of division and hatred. But since I once again mentioned the war and the tragedy of the Holocaust, let me say something else. That is the tragedy that still has a major impact on our society. I'm talking about Poland, but also other countries in the region of Central and Eastern Europe. But of course, Poland is the country I know best. Poland used to be the most diverse society in the whole of Europe for many centuries. It was a country where about 30 languages were spoken. It was a country where different Christian denominations lived together side by side, by and large peacefully, especially if you compare the Polish history of coexistence of denominations with some Western European states that had civil wars because of religious differences. So Poland was different in the sense also that many of the refugees who were persecuted in their countries because of religion, because of denomination, they went to Poland and settled in Poland. From countries such as Scotland or the Netherlands or France, many of the religious exiles they went to Poland. But it was not just the Christians who lived in Poland. The Jews were a big minority, often as a result of persecution in Western Europe. They moved and settled in Poland, which was a relatively safe place for them for hundreds of years. Also some Muslims, the Tatars in the late Middle Ages, they also came and settled in Poland. And there is still a very small Muslim community in Poland now. So it was a very diverse society for a long time. But as a result of World War II, as a result of the Holocaust against the Jews, also against the Roma, other groups, also as a result of the changes of borders, deportations, ethnic cleansing, Poland today is the most monocultural society in the whole of Europe. It has the smallest percentage of minorities, both ethnic and religious minorities. So that is why I'm saying that the tragedy of World War II has had a really profound effect on Polish society. And that is why I said that the football championship was the first experience for many millions of Polish people of a multicultural, diverse society. Those tragic results of World War II are still with us. But of course, World War II was the tragedy that happened not only in Poland and not only in Europe. It also happened in Asia. And Professor Frank reminded me of the tragedy of Hiroshima. Of course, also in Southeast Asia, if you go to Kanchanaburi, you will also see the evidence of the way World War II affected this region. And it was interesting for me to see in one book that I have read about Kanchanaburi. It was referred to as the Auschwitz of Southeast Asia, which was an interesting analogy. And Auschwitz was the biggest Nazi death camp in Poland. So we can see that this experience is actually a universal experience of humanity, the experience of conflict, the experience of war, and World War II in particular. But okay, I think it is a good idea for me to stop talking now and ask you your opinions, your perspectives. If you have some comments or questions about what I mentioned so far, I would be very grateful if you share them.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dr. Pintong, and I'm a lecturer here for the peace studies. Some of the students here also. Thank you very much for such a wonderful sharing experience, and thank you for you to introduce him very beautifully in the morning. Thank you very much for all the students to be here today, so vast and a lot of students. So my questions go direct to the point. You mentioned about the tragedy, and one point is the impact on humanity. Not only it's just only from the World War II that we know, just so many countries so far. So in terms of your experience, what is the like activities or anything, not from the theory, we're not talking about philosophy or academic or theory. What's from your experience that you can do some activities that can heal the impact on humanity? I mean, these impacts from Poland, from Kanchanaburi, Southeast Asia, through, we know the history, right? But it goes so vast since the ancient time, historically, until nowadays, we still see some impacts on the families and in terms of the community. So my question is that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very interesting question and the comment. And thank you for referring to the notion of healing. I think it's very appropriate. Of course, healing is a process. It cannot be done easily, but I believe it can be done. And if I can once again relate to the analogies or comparisons between Europe and Asia, I was in South Korea and Japan for a couple of weeks, as it was mentioned, and I spent those 2 weeks talking quite often about the experience of Polish-German reconciliation as a possible example or inspiration for the Korean-Japanese relationship, which, as we know, is also historically very painful and very difficult, and especially now there is quite a lot of tension also on the question of memory and and reparation. That's still unresolved. I hope it can be resolved. But what is clear to me is that the process of Polish-German reconciliation has taken place for decades now, and I think it is largely successful. I think it's not perfect, it's not fully successful, and especially on the political level there are still issues that come back. But I think that on the social level, also if you look at the sociological research that is available, I think the results are quite good. So I think the interactions between Poles and Germans are now quite positive, despite all the history of conflict and all the tragedy and all the mass murder that took place. And of course, the festival I mentioned is one good example of that, with especially young people from Poland and Germany coming together and interacting in a positive way. But of course, it took a long time. And I believe the very important step in that process was actually a letter. A public letter written by the Polish Catholic bishops to the German bishops in the mid-1960s. And I can tell you, I'm no big fan of the Polish Catholic Church. I'm very critical of it in many ways. But I think that gesture was actually a positive gesture and an important gesture. And especially one phrase that the Polish Catholic bishops used in that letter. It was, "We forgive you and we ask for forgiveness." And that was just 20 years after World War II. And you can imagine it was a very controversial phrase to use in a public letter to the Germans. But I think it was an important step for many people to reflect on the idea of reconciliation between Poland and Germany, but maybe I should say between Poles and Germans as people. And once again, I believe this is not a process that can happen easily. But I think if there is any sort of positive lesson from the Polish-German reconciliation, I think that would be one such example. So I believe there is a big role to be played by political leaders, of course, but there is also a big role to be played by civil society. And especially on the level of informal education, as I mentioned earlier, I think that is really important. But it's not simple, and it has taken a long time. Mm-hmm.
Achan, Nazism is still existence in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is the paradox. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
And paradoxically, we know it is the most criminal ideology possibly in human history.
Yes.
But it still exists. Actually, this picture you can see on the screen is one illustration of that. And of course, talking about symbols here, we should stress the swastika has a different meaning in Europe and in Poland, because it is the symbol of Nazism. This is a picture taken in a Jewish cemetery in Poland.
Yes.
That was desecrated by Nazi symbols, which is one of many examples of the existence of neo-Nazism, even in a country like Poland that suffered so much. And the question I mentioned in the very beginning: how is it possible Yes, it's difficult to answer, but I believe one part of the answer is the fact that time passes,
Yeah.
and people such as my grandmother, who was forced to work in Nazi Germany as a slave, transported from Poland, many of those people are no longer with us. So the direct personal memory of the suffering inflicted by Nazism is no longer there. And I think this is not the only reason, but it is a big part of the reason why neo-Nazism, as a kind of ideological mutation, has been able to function in Europe today, so many years after all those tragedies, all those horrors of fascism and Nazism and World War II.
And secondly, you didn't mention Constantinople, was the biggest library, Jewish library in Europe. This library destroyed by Nazi or someone. We got history. This is cruised. Who made this group, or this is by Nazi or another group?
Did you mention Constantinople?
Yeah, Constantinople.
Well, that was not occupied by Nazi Germany, but Nazi Germany destroyed many other libraries and many other monuments, many other sites of cultural heritage, both in Poland and in other places. There are many examples of that. But I think what you say, brings me to the topic of what is really the core ideological idea of Nazism. I believe it is the idea of total cultural homogeneity. Okay, so basically, the Nazi idea is for a country or a continent to be culturally, ethnically, racially, religiously, uniform. Okay, so in this vision of total cultural homogeneity, there is no place for difference. There is no place for diversity. There is no place for minorities of any kind. And I think this, if we understand fascism and Nazism as based on this idea of total cultural homogeneity, we can understand better how it's possible for Nazism to exist also in the 21st century. It is the ideology of radical intolerance.
So, my name is Nalimon. I just be the first class of IBSC student. So I just graduate from the master degree from USA, and I have experience in during 911 because at that time I'm just stay 2 blocks away from Pentagon City, so I can see the like a disorder people around, so on and so forth. So I am impressed with the music that you use, because like for the music can generate like different frequency, right? Like a theta or alpha or so on. So what kind of the music that you use to like to in your organization?
Oh, thank you for this question. Like I said, I think that the diversity of sounds is also important. So it is not just the message that is conveyed through lyrics, through words, but it is the diversity of sounds that that is very very important in our activity. So in short, my answer would be we have tried to use all kinds of music, even the kinds of music that I personally cannot really stand, but you know there are people who enjoy it, and I think it's also one of the challenges of tolerance, to be able to at least tolerate other people's musical preferences. But as we know, many of the subcultures are based on music, and that also includes some of the subcultures that are very strongly intolerant. But they all have their own types of music, and it can also be a source of division. And we always tried to go beyond division. So to give you a concrete answer, many of the activists of Never Again Association, they came to this type of civil society activism through their participation in so-called alternative rock music. But that is just one example. There are also others who have been active in classical music. And I don't know if anybody heard of a famous Polish classical composer. His name is Penderecki, who actually composed a very important piece of music called Requiem for Hiroshima, which I think is an interesting example showing that also classical music can have a message, even if it's without words. Well, unless it's opera, but even a piece of classical music can have a very profound universal message, and everything that's in between. We have also tried to use in a positive sense. So reggae music, for example, has been successfully used to promote the positive message of peace and respect. And I think many of us in this room know the songs of Bob Marley. That is a really good example, I think, of how popular culture can promote a positive message. But one big challenge for us has been hip hop, and that is very popular internationally, as I can see from the reactions. Also in Poland, I personally wrote one of the first longer articles about hip hop in Poland in the mid 1990s, and as we know, it is originally an African American music form, and you might think it is naturally open to the messages of anti-racism, but paradoxically and ironically, in our case, in Poland, it has also been used by the white nationalist groups that have taken an African American music form and employed it in the promotion of white nationalism, which doesn't really make sense, logically speaking. But I think one of the important features of racist and nationalist ideology is that it's irrational. So it can also, in this case, it can also use an African American music form to promote a negative message, and we have seen this quite a lot in Poland in recent years. But well, I agree. It's an interesting subject, and you know, there are both opportunities and challenges when we talk about musical styles.
Because the reason I asked is our organize also like manage about organize the student, like almost 1,000 students to participate in meditation and use the music as well. But so far we use like classical music or jazz music, but maybe hip hop, maybe another, or maybe optional for us. Just would like to open-minded.
No, thank you very much. I would be very happy to learn more about the way you have used music in your activity. But well, music is an important part of culture and an important part of also of identity formation. So it's a very rich field for discussion and for research too. Yes.
I want to share a couple of experiences related to some useful materials for how to affect reconciliation. The first experience was working on a platform in a high school, in a public event, with the chairperson of Jewish Studies from the College of New Jersey, which has a fairly big Jewish population, New Jersey. And we did an event, it was part of the Philosophy Consortium, and we did an event about the book called The Sunflower by Simon Wiesenthal. And the book got a lot of discussion. Maybe some people know that the sunflower was a symbol on the tombs of German soldiers who died in this situation, but that Jewish people didn't get the sunflower, symbolizing some kind of immortality or immortal life. What was especially interesting about this book was it centered around a story of a dying Nazi asking forgiveness in a hospital setting from a Jewish person who happened to be there. The narrative ran around whether the Jewish person who turned out to be Simon Wiesenthal should forgive him or not. And he just witnessed. He didn't condemn, he didn't forgive. And at the end of the book, we had several religious leaders giving their responses. What would they do? It promotes dialogue. It was really very effective. The second experience I have is reviewing a book called Buddhism and Whiteness. I doubt very much if people in the room are aware that people of color in American Sangha have been made invisible, have been not made welcome in middle-class white Sangha contexts, and that they are now, in 2019, speaking out in a book with 14 essays, most of them about experiences that people have had, but also some about critical race theory and Buddhist studies. So I think these two things, Buddhism and Whiteness, Critical Studies, 2019, Lexington Books, and also the Simon Wiesenthal volume, Sunflower, they're remarkable. I just want to say how much I appreciate that. And also your being with us as a catalyst.
Thank you very much. Well, let me say, I don't know the second book on Buddhism and whiteness. I'm very interested, and thank you for mentioning it to me. I know the book by Simon Wiesenthal, who has been one of our big heroes, I should say. I mentioned the problem, the challenge of the generation of people who experienced World War II not being with us anymore. But at the same time, I should also mention, I think we were lucky when we started the Never Again Association. We had an opportunity to personally meet or interact with some people from that generation, and that included Simon Wiesenthal, whom I met in Warsaw in the early 90s, and who also stayed in touch with us and wrote us beautiful letters in Polish. And we knew that his secretary in Vienna didn't know any Polish, so that meant he wrote the letters by himself on a typing machine. So yes, that is one of the people who inspired us. But there were also other people that I think I could mention here. I think they are actually mentioned. Oh yes, they are mentioned on the screen. Jan Karski is one of them. That's a very impressive story. If you like, Jan Karski was a member of the Polish resistance, who himself went to the Nazi concentration ghettos and camps, and himself witnessed what was happening to the Jews, and he took this testimony and information to the West, to Britain and the US, and he personally met with people such as President Roosevelt and told him what was happening in Poland. And for many years after the war, he lived in the US. He was actually a professor at Georgetown. And he died, I believe, in 1999. For many years he had a sense of guilt, because he said, I didn't manage to convince the Western leaders to take action about what was happening in Poland, or I didn't manage to convince them urgent action was necessary to stop the Holocaust. And I never met Jan Karski personally, but we exchanged letters, and his letters have been very important and very inspirational to us, because, well, he actually said himself, my generation failed, and I hope your generation will be more successful in stopping such hatred. So let me just stop at this example, but I could list more examples of people from the generation that experienced World War II, that gave us very important inspiration. Thank you. Okay, I think we have 5 minutes, yes, for more. There is one more comment here. Oh, the magazine, yes, it is, the Polish title is Nigdy Więcej, and the English title is simply Never Again. Never Again. And, well, the magazine is in Polish, but it also has a summary in English for each issue. So if you are interested, I would very much encourage you to have a look at the website of the Never Again Association, which is easy to remember. It's neveragainassociation.org. Okay, and those English language summaries of the articles are all there, and that actually includes articles written by or with some of the people we have just mentioned. So Simon Wiesenthal, Jan Karski, also Marek Edelman, who was deputy commander of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, also a very historic person, and many other articles on those topics of racism and discrimination, but also peace and respect. Yes, please. Uh-huh.
art also, because for example, I think all kind of art could be very powerful in the communication and transmitting message, and in our day, for example, also video are very working a lot with communication and actor, but also YouTuber, also fashion people and other things, also dance and yeah. So I think all kind of art can transmit good message about diversity and living with other people. Yeah.
No, thank you very much, and I completely agree with you. I only mentioned music and sports, I guess, partly because they seem to be the most currently the most popular elements of popular culture, but not they're by all means not the only important elements of culture. I completely agree with you, and what you said reminds me, for example, of one Cambodian dance group under the name New Cambodian Artists. I think that is the name of, but it is specifically a dance group that deals with the history of genocide, but also with those challenges of dealing with the past and trauma and healing through dance. I met them in Phnom Penh last year, and I would highly recommend this kind of artistic activity, but also visual art. Yes, one of our big friends and allies in Poland has been Wilhelm Sasnal, who is probably the most successful visual artist in Poland today, and also very successful internationally in New York and other places. And he designed some of the covers of our magazine Never Again, and also he has been outspoken in his support for the activity of Never Again Association. As we speak, there is a new exhibition in the Museum of Modern Art in Warsaw under the title Never Again: Art against fascism in the 20th century and the 21st century. And I'm very happy and proud that the Never Again Association is a partner of this new exhibition, which documents the way that art has served the struggle against fascism as well as neo-fascism. One thing that we have not used is video games, for example. And when I conducted a workshop at Chulalongkorn University last week, many students said, "Oh, you should use video games to promote the message of tolerance." And to be honest, it's something that we haven't done, and something I'm going to take with me back to Europe as an inspiration. But some people have also used comic novels. Is that the way you? Yeah. Manga is one version of the art form. Yes, but yesterday at Chulalongkorn University we discussed the mouse. I don't know if people know this. I think visual novel is the right term, by Art Spiegelman. It is about the Holocaust in Poland and the plight of the Jewish people under Nazi occupation in the form of a comic book, which has been controversial to some people because, well, according to the conventional interpretation, comic books are not quite serious as an art form, but this particular book has a very serious subject, namely the Holocaust, and I think it has been quite successful in reaching a very broad audience, and especially the young audience that is sometimes difficult. But thank you for this comment. I agree with you, and I think it's important. Thank you.
Good morning, Professor. I am a student of IBSC, and this topic about race intolerance has something very close to my heart, because I come from Malaysia, and Malaysia is now facing this problem, non-tolerance. We are at the lowest point now. I noticed that there are many things that civil activists in our Malaysia has tried to do, initiative. They have, like you say, tried music. We have cultural, mixed cultural, and we have on Independence Day, we have dance where we have see all the various dance of different races. They are together. And songs, we even composer will put up songs, but it just doesn't seem to, it works at that day. And then later on we have this, like recently we have this friendly match between Malaysia and Indonesia, and also when we have matches between our own states, interstates, just the no reconciliation. Yeah, it's just, and the day itself, yes, everybody's happy, they listen to the song, they dance to the song, the music and all that. And later on, when things are like a football competition we have, friendly one, everybody will be on one side, you know, depending on their race or their nations. And for the country as a whole, we will be divided by religion. So sometimes as a student, it perplexes me. Can our initiative in reconciliation work when we have religious intolerance or the factor of religion, or should we just have no religion so it's easier to have a reconciliation or healing? Thank you.
Well, thank you for these comments too. I think you open up many issues that I hope we can continue discussing after lunch, and especially the role of religion, both as part of the problem, but hopefully also part of the solution, maybe. So I hope we can continue this conversation later today. But if I can use this opportunity to mention football again, since you mentioned it too. I don't know if everybody heard the news from July when it was publicly announced. There is a now official initiative, I think initiated by Thailand, but it is already official on the level of ASEAN, to organize a football World Cup in Southeast Asia. I don't remember which year, but it's still many years to go. So there is still a lot of time for preparation. But I thought, well, that's a very interesting initiative. That's a very interesting and big challenge. But it could be an interesting opportunity also in the field of using sports, a big sports event, to promote intercultural dialogue and unity. I don't know how well known is this initiative, but I thought it is very interesting. And our organization and me personally, we have also we also have the experience of assisting in the preparation of the Football World Cup in Russia last year, which was also a big event and also a big challenge on many levels. But it was another interesting experience. So if people are interested, we are also happy to share those experiences in Southeast Asia in future. But I would suggest we can continue the dialogue after lunch. That means after 1 o'clock. Yes.
Thank you, Professor. We will continue in the